Jared Kushner's real estate company has been found committing wrongdoing in pushing individuals out of rent-controlled properties in order to then rent them out to people who are willing to pay more. Now, this is all in New York City, and the way New York City works, just like many other cities throughout the country with rent-controlled buildings, is if a tenant is living in a rent-controlled unit, that individual's rent cannot increase, a giant amount in any given year. The landlord can increase it incrementally, a tiny percentage each year. And that's a way of making sure that people have affordable housing. Now, the only way that the tenant or the only way that the owner or landlord can charge more or market value is if the person moves out of the rent controlled unit and a new person moves in. At that point, they can rent it out for market value. Now, with that said, what Jared Kushner's company was found guilty of doing was creating a situation that was so uncomfortable for the tenants living in those rent-controlled units that a lot of them couldn't take it anymore and they moved out. So when he would file for permits in order to do construction, he needed to note the exact number of people living in rent-controlled units. He lied in those documents. So in order for the city to approve construction, they need to make sure that the construction isn't going to be burdensome for those living in the rent-controlled units. He purposely lied so the city wouldn't oversee what he was doing or oversee the construction that was taking place. They wanted the city to essentially green light the construction. Anyway, the Associated Press did great work in investigating this, and that led to lawmakers in New York looking into it themselves, and they've issued a fine. That's the update to this story. So how much is this fine? $210,000. That's it.
Yeah, they're gonna brush that off. That's no big deal to them. So I think the worst part of this is how they did it.
Yeah.
And it's just how the powerful crush the powerless is unfortunately the incessant drumbeat of our lives in America. There are oligarchs who rule us, and Jared Kushner is one of them. He was running the company at the time. They chose to do this. That's why they've been fined. And it was good groups like Housing Rights Initiative that launched this, not against Jared Kushner. They launched it to make sure against the landlords, to make sure that they're not screwing over the tenants in general. By the way, one of the guys who was also doing it, Michael Cohen. So if it was a political hit job, at this point, they would actually want to protect Michael Cohen because he's turning evidence against Donald Trump, but they are not, because that's not what they care about. They care about housing rights.
Yeah.
So one of the advocates for tenants said they were, quote, weaponizing construction.
Yeah.
So
Kushner,
let's read some of those quotes. They're amazing.
So first, I want to tell you just how widespread this was. So the New York City Department of Buildings fined Kushner Co.'s for filing 42 false applications for construction work in 17 buildings, saying that there were no rent-regulated tenants in the units. It was just a flat-out lie. Okay, Kushner Co.'s was able to clear out 250 residents in 3 years from the 338-unit Brooklyn building so their apartments could be sold, earning the firm $155 million in sales. Okay, and to the statement that Cenk was alluding to earlier, they talk about how they essentially weaponized construction, driving out tenants, paying lower rent with constant noise, ripped up apartments, and interrupted plumbing.
So that's not all. So I thought when I first heard about this story that it was mainly just driving them out with unbearable noise. And sometimes they do it during the day, sometimes they do it during night on purpose to drive them crazy. By the way, this is what we did to Noriega to drive him out of the embassy when he was hiding. This is what we do to torture people so they turn themselves in. And so, but they're doing it for profit here and oftentimes get away with it. Good job by New York City in catching them in this time. But it's not just the noise. They rip up their plumbing. So then they can't take a shower, they don't have any water, they can't brush their teeth, they don't have any plumbing.
So there was flooding in some of these units as a result of that. Some of the tenants complained of toxic dust, which often happens if you're doing construction in an old building. Noise, as we mentioned, and rodent infestations, because that's fun.
No, but think about how bad a guy you have to be to think, hey, you know what? I bought this building knowing that it is rent control. It has rent control apartments in it. I've calculated that into my cost, but that's inconvenient to me. And these people can't afford this apartment otherwise. I got a great idea. I will ruin their lives until I drive them away from that apartment. And then I don't care where they go. They probably can't afford any other apartments around here. They're gonna have to just maybe move out of the city. I don't care, but I'm gonna maximize profit. How am I gonna do it? I'm gonna release rats basically into their apartment. I'm gonna flood their apartment. I'm gonna cut their water, and I'm gonna do construction day in and day out until I drive them crazy, and then they leave. And then all of society in America celebrates people like this, and they're like, yeah, but hey, they're successful. What does it mean to be successful?
Right.
Successful how? By what metric? To me, that's not success. These people are monsters. So yes, Jared Kushner, who does that, ruins people's lives so he has apparently $811 million, but it's not enough. It's not enough. He's got to release rats into your house, destroy your life for another couple of $1 million.
Right, and so I want to be fair. I want to give you the reaction from Kushner Co.'s. They basically have denied any wrongdoing. They say that they're going to appeal this fine. Kushner, Jared Kushner, was the individual running this company at the time that these false reports were submitted to the city. So I want to be clear about that. So what are they saying happened? They're blaming it on a third party. Because Republicans, the party of responsibility, doesn't want to take responsibility for what happened here. Jared Kushner was the head of this company when this happened. So how about the CEO, the head of the company, take ownership of the wrongdoings that occurred at this time frame? This was right before he decided to leave the company to go work for Trump.
He's still a stakeholder in the company, so that leaving the company is irrelevant. He still makes money off of it. And look, as with the big banks that rip you off all the time, the mistakes are never against them. They're always somehow against you. Oh golly gee, a third party wound up making me a lot of money, and I didn't happen to check in that they were releasing rats and trying to purposely drive you crazy. How did I make money off of that? If that third party was costing them money, do you think they would have found out? Immediately, and they would have regulated on their ass. Instead, and besides which, I don't even believe them. I think this is part and parcel of what they do. That's why they were fined, and this happens all the time.
Have you heard about the new TYT audio network? We have some great new shows for you. Find us wherever you get your podcast by searching for TYT Network, or head over to tyt.com/audio.